He pretended to be homeless just to see who truly respected him. It was still early morning in downtown Portland. The streets were already busy, though the air remained cold. Among the rush of people hurrying past, an old man sat quietly on the sidewalk, leaning against the wall of a bakery that hadn't opened yet. His body was thin, his skin wrinkled, and his military jacket was worn out, torn in several places. In front of him sat a large piece of cardboard. The message written on it was simple, yet piercing. War veteran. Don't need money. Just want to know who still cares. His name was Walter Green, 72 years old, but his eyes were still sharp, his hearing still keen. And today, he wasn't here for sympathy. He was here to test something deeper than loose change. Walter had once served as an Army officer, deployed in multiple war zones. After retiring, he lived a quiet life in a small house outside the city. But in recent years, something began to gnaw at him. He felt the world was changing. Fewer people seemed to respect sacrifice. More people judged by what they saw on the surface. That's what drove him to do something unusual. For a full week, Walter decided to disguise himself as a homeless man, not to create a spectacle, but to see who would still recognize his humanity without being told who he was. The first day began with mixed emotions. He had been sitting there for 2 hours. Hundreds of people passed by. Most didn't even glance his way. Some looked, then picked up their pace. One young man even laughed at him from across the street. No one spoke to him. No one asked a question. Walter wasn't asking for money. He simply sat in silence. But in that silence, he observed. He took mental notes. He stored every reaction in his heart and in the small hidden camera sewn into the collar of his worn-out jacket. His face remained still. But inside his chest, something began to tighten. Had the world really grown this cold? A gust of wind blew a flyer from a neighboring shop, landing gently by his feet. 2 teenagers walked past. One of them stared and whispered, "Is that a homeless guy or a zombie?" Walter held his breath. He didn't respond. He just stared blankly down the street, hoping that maybe one person would look at him and see more than garbage. In the distance, car horns echoed through the city. Life moved on. But on that piece of sidewalk, time stood still, and his experiment had only just begun. Underneath the worn clothes, beneath the layers of dirt and silence, sat a man who once led platoons through deserts and jungles. Walter Green wasn't just another face in the crowd. He had received medals. He had saved lives. But today, no one seemed to care. This experiment wasn't born out of bitterness. It came from a place of quiet sorrow. Over the past year, Walter had watched how people treated the elderly, how uniform pride was forgotten the moment the uniform came off. So he asked himself one question. If they didn't know who I was, would they still respect me? With that thought, he made a plan. He collected an old jacket from his garage, one that hadn't been washed in years. He rubbed dirt on his jeans. He refused to shave. Then, using a few savings, he bought a micro camera smaller than a matchbox and stitched it into the fabric near his collar. He told no one, no family, no neighbors. This had to be real. That first day had already taught him something bitter. Most people only give kindness when they think it's deserved. At noon, the sun rose high, casting harsh shadows on the pavement. Walter hadn't moved. He hadn't spoken. Still, the city kept ignoring him. Then came the kids. 2 boys on skateboards stopped a few feet away. One pointed and laughed. "Yo, take a look at Grandpa over there. Bet he smells like a garbage can." The other one chuckled, then threw a crumpled soda can in Walter's direction. "Here you go, old man. Something to keep you company." The can rolled and stopped near his boot. Walter didn't flinch. He didn't scold them. He just lowered his head and listened to the sound of their laughter echoing down the block. Behind his silence, the camera kept rolling. He began to wonder how many of these same people would have shaken his hand years ago, thanked him for his service, or even cried beside his flag-draped coffin if he had fallen in war. Now, they couldn't even look him in the eye. A soft breeze picked up, carrying the scent of pretzels from a food cart nearby. Walter's stomach rumbled, but he ignored it. Hunger he could handle. Disrespect, that was harder to digest. That afternoon, a well-dressed couple walked by. The man glanced at Walter, nudged his wife, and said loudly, "Portland's turning into a trash heap. Look at this mess." Walter turned his face toward the street. It wasn't just about testing strangers anymore. It was becoming a mirror, showing a version of society he had hoped didn't exist. But somewhere deep inside, he still believed there had to be someone who would see past the dirt and cardboard. As the afternoon wore on, shadows grew longer across the sidewalk. Walter's body had grown stiff. Hours of sitting on cold concrete took their toll. But he remained still, watching, waiting, and listening. Foot traffic slowed a bit as the workday came to a close. Most people walked faster, eager to get home, eyes glued to their phones or locked in the distance ahead. Not one of them stopped. Not one of them read the sign on his cardboard until she appeared. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7, wearing a red jacket and pink sneakers. She held her mother's hand tightly as they approached. The woman, dressed in a beige coat, didn't seem to notice Walter, but the child did. She stopped walking and tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mama, wait," she whispered. "What is it?" her mother asked, distracted. The girl pointed. "That man, he looks cold." The mother sighed. "Sweetie, we really have to go." But before she could finish, the girl let go of her hand, reached into the small paper bag she was holding, and pulled out a loaf of bread wrapped in plastic. She walked up to Walter slowly, hesitating for just a second. Then, with both hands, she placed the bread beside his sign and looked up. "I don't have money," she said softly, "but I hope this helps." Walter blinked. No one had spoken to him all day, not even once. His throat tightened. He tried to say thank you, but no sound came out. His lips trembled. The girl gave him a small, shy smile before turning around and running back to her mother. From the distance, Walter heard the woman ask, "Why did you do that?" "Because he looked like someone my grandpa used to know," the girl replied. And then they were gone. Walter sat in silence, the loaf of bread still warm beside him. The camera hidden in his jacket captured it all. But this moment wasn't for the world. This was for him. One act of kindness. One child who saw a person, not a problem. For the first time that day, Walter let his eyes close, not from exhaustion, but from something softer, something unfamiliar. Hope. But that peace didn't last long. Not 10 minutes later, another man approached, mid-30s, clean suit, shiny shoes. He stopped in front of Walter, read the sign, and laughed out loud. "Seriously? Respect? You want respect looking like that?" The man scoffed. "This is what happens when you make bad life choices." He tossed a quarter toward Walter, didn't wait to see where it landed, and walked off laughing to himself. Walter opened his eyes. The moment of warmth had passed, and reality had returned like a cold wind. Evening rolled in, cloaking the city in cooler air and flickering streetlights. Walter hadn't moved much. His legs were numb, his back ached, and the bread from earlier still sat untouched beside him. Not out of pride, but out of something else, restraint. A quiet discipline that never left him, even now. Pedestrians were fewer now. Those who passed looked even more hurried than before, wrapped in jackets and the urgency to get home. The city felt colder, not just in temperature, but in spirit. Walter's eyes were half closed when he noticed a flicker of red and blue reflecting off a nearby storefront window. A police cruiser slowly pulled up near the curb, tires crackling against scattered leaves. A young officer stepped out, adjusting his duty belt as he approached. Walter didn't flinch. He had expected this. "Sir," the officer began, voice firm but not unkind, "you can't stay here overnight. There's a shelter 2 blocks north. I can help you get there, if you want." Walter remained silent. The officer knelt slightly to get a better look at him. He read the cardboard sign carefully. His eyes lingered on the word veteran. "Were you really in the service?" he asked, voice a bit softer now. Walter nodded once. The officer studied him, as if unsure what to do next. He took a slow breath, then glanced down the empty sidewalk. "My dad was in the Army," he finally said. "He used to tell me stories when I was a kid About Iraq, Fallujah. Walter met his gaze. For a second, the space between them didn't feel like a sidewalk and a badge. It felt like something older, deeper. The officer stood up. He didn't ask for ID. Didn't press further. "Look," he said, almost whispering now, "I won't ask you to move. Just be safe out here tonight." Then, in one smooth motion, he reached into his coat pocket and placed a small hand warmer packet beside the bread. "It gets colder after midnight." Without waiting for a reply, he turned and walked back to his cruiser. The engine started, but the car didn't drive off immediately. The officer sat inside for a long moment before slowly pulling away, disappearing into the evening fog. Walter exhaled, not because of what the officer said, but because of what he didn't say. No threats, no assumptions, just recognition. Recognition that didn't come from a uniform or medals or titles, just from being human. Walter leaned back against the wall and looked up at the darkening sky. The city hadn't changed, but maybe, just maybe, not all of it had forgotten him. Night had fully descended on the city. The warm glow from nearby cafes and apartment windows flickered like distant stars, visible but unreachable. Walter remained where he had sat all day. His joints ached. His lips were dry. His fingers trembled slightly from the cold, even with the small hand warmer resting between his palms. He was almost ready to leave. But then came the sound of footsteps, sharp, purposeful, expensive, the kind of walk that announced itself before the man even spoke. Walter looked up. A man in his 40s, sharply dressed in a navy suit, hair slicked back, talking loudly on his phone. His leather shoes tapped confidently against the pavement as he approached, the rhythm slowing when he noticed Walter sitting there. The man ended his call with a half-laugh and tucked the phone into his coat pocket. He turned to Walter, standing just a foot away. "Jesus," he muttered, shaking his head. "Another one." He crouched slightly, pretending to inspect a cardboard sign. "A veteran, huh?" he said with a smirk. "Let me guess. Sob story. Bad investments. A bottle too many? Now you're here trying to guilt people into giving you money." Walter remained silent. His eyes didn't blink. The man laughed. "I used to work with a guy like you. Big on hero talk. Medal on the desk. Know where he is now? Drunk in Phoenix. Just like this." He reached into his wallet, pulled out a $5 bill, then paused. "Actually, you know what?" he said, his voice turning icy. "I'll keep it, because respect is earned. And you gave yours away." He tucked the bill back into his wallet and dropped a single coin, a dirty, scratched quarter, onto the ground near Walter's foot. The sound of it hitting the concrete echoed louder than it should have. Then he stood up and adjusted his collar. "You want respect? Get a job," he sneered, before walking off, disappearing into the night with the same smug footsteps that brought him there. Walter didn't move. He stared at the quarter, then at the bread beside him. He didn't pick it up, didn't pocket it. He just let the silence swell around him. For a brief moment, the camera hidden in his jacket captured something raw. Not anger, not shame, but a quiet fracture. A crack in the shell of a man who had faced gunfire, seen death, and walked through years of storms, only to be dismissed with a smirk and a coin. He closed his eyes, not because he was tired, but because he did want the world to see the hurt behind them. The city kept moving. The sidewalk stayed cold, and Walter sat in silence, still waiting for someone who might see him. Hours passed. The streets emptied. Shops closed one by one, their neon signs dimming into the dark. Walter was now just a silhouette on a forgotten corner, unmoving, alone. But inside the folds of his jacket, something else remained alert. The camera, nestled carefully behind a stitch seam near the collar. The tiny lens had been quietly watching all day, capturing faces, voices, laughter, disgust, and silence. It wasn't just filming strangers. It was documenting a question Walter had long feared asking. Had the world stopped caring? When Walter first installed the camera, he had done it reluctantly. He didn't want to shame anyone. He didn't want to go viral. He just wanted proof for himself. proof that decency still existed without the presence of medals, uniforms, or national anthems. Now, after nearly 12 hours of sitting in the same spot, the memory card was nearly full, but Walter's heart still painfully empty. A pair of delivery drivers passed by without a word. A young woman dropped her coffee cup inches from him, letting the contents splash toward his boots. She didn't stop. She didn't look back. Walter stared down at the puddle. His own reflection stared back, distorted, tired, aged. He whispered softly to himself. A name, a call sign, a moment from the battlefield that no one on the sidewalk would ever know. Suddenly, a low voice came from behind him. Long day? Walter turned slightly. A man stood there, hooded sweatshirt, backpack slung over one shoulder. Probably in his late 20s. His clothes were old but clean. His eyes? Tired but gentle. Walter didn't reply. But the man sat down anyway, just a few feet away, pulling out a foil-wrapped sandwich. You hungry? He asked, unwrapping it halfway and offering the other half. Walter stared. The man extended his hand further. Look, I know how it is. I've been out here too. Don't need your story. Just here. Walter slowly took the sandwich. His fingers brushed the stranger's hand. Warm. For a moment, he didn't speak. He couldn't. Then, almost in a whisper, he asked, Why are you helping me? The man shrugged. Because someone once helped me. That's it. They sat in silence for a while, chewing slowly. No small talk. No questions. Just quiet company. Finally, the man stood up. Stay safe, old man, he said. It's colder near the river. Don't go that way. And just like that, he was gone. Walter stared after him, his breath visible in the freezing air. That sandwich, still warm in his hand, felt heavier than it should, because for the first time that day, someone didn't walk past. Someone didn't judge. Someone gave without needing to know his name. And that single moment was captured by the camera, not as a clip, not as content, but as evidence that even in a city full of closed eyes, there was still light left in the cracks. The sky began to pale, turning from black to gray. Morning crept in slowly, brushing the tops of buildings with faint light. Dew gathered on the sidewalk. Street sweepers hummed in the distance. Walter hadn't slept. He sat upright, blanketless, sandwich untouched beside him, arms wrapped around his knees. The bread from the little girl had gone slightly stale. The coin from the suited man still lay on the concrete, and inside his jacket, the camera had quietly run out of space. But Walter didn't move. He was deep in thought. He had spent decades in service, years in desert heat and jungle rain. He had carried wounded men on his back, buried friends, stood through ceremonies of silence and salutes. He had wore a uniform that once made people stand taller when they saw him. Now, they looked away. But not everyone. There were 3 moments yesterday that haunted him, in a good way. The girl with the bread, the police officer with the hand warmer, the man with the sandwich. 3 people, 3 reminders. Maybe that was enough. Walter slowly reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the original plan he had written for himself. 1 week, 7 days, 7 sidewalks. A simple test of human nature. But now, after only 1 day, his bones hurt, his heart was heavy, and his spirit, though not broken, was tired. He stared at the paper, then folded it again and tucked it back inside. This experiment wasn't over, but it was time for the next phase. Walter stood up for the first time in over 15 hours. His knees cracked, his back protested, but he rose anyway, with trembling hands. He picked up the cardboard sign and gently brushed off the dust. He folded it under his arm. Then, one by one, he picked up the bread, the coin, and the leftover sandwich, placing them into a worn-out plastic bag. The camera lens, though no longer recording, remained pointed outward. Its work complete, Walter began to walk. Not home, but to somewhere nearby. A small rented office just a few blocks away. Inside was a laptop, a chair, a power outlet, and a plan. Because now He wasn't just a man with a story. He was a man with proof. And soon the world would see it. The office was modest, bare walls, a second-hand chair, a desk with scuffed edges. But to Walter, it felt like a command post. Quiet, focused, exactly what he needed. He connected the camera to the laptop. The files loaded slowly, small thumbnails appearing one by one. Each clip had a timestamp, each one a different face. He watched them all, the laughter of the teenagers, the scorn from the man in the suit, the little girl's kindness, the police officer's hesitation, the young man's silent compassion. Each moment played out again on the screen. No commentary, no dramatic music, just raw footage, just truth. Walter didn't smile. He didn't cry. He simply watched, absorbing it all. Then he clicked Save As and titled the project. Would you still respect him if you didn't know? But he wasn't done yet. The next day, Walter shaved. He cut his hair, washed his face. He put on clean clothes, a simple collared shirt, dark pants, and a navy coat with a pin on the left chest. A pin shaped like an eagle, barely larger than a coin. And he returned to the same corner, same hour. But this time, he didn't carry a sign. He stood upright, confident, a quiet presence among the noise of the city. Then he walked, block by block. He found the suited man first, outside the same building, talking on his phone again. Walter stopped a few feet away, waiting until the man noticed. There was a flicker of recognition, confusion, then silence. Walter reached into his coat and pulled out a printed still from the video. One frame frozen in time. It showed the man crouching, coin in hand, face twisted in disdain. I just wanted you to see what you look like, Walter said calmly. The man tried to speak, but said nothing. Walter turned and walked away. Next, he found the two teenagers near the skate park. One of them laughed again when he saw Walter coming, until Walter showed them the clip on his phone. Their laughter stopped. The screen showed their own faces, mocking, throwing trash. The volume was clear. I thought you might want to know, Walter said. Someday, you'll grow older too. Then he left. Finally, he returned to the bakery and waited. Minutes passed. Then, through the crowd, the little girl appeared, this time without the bread, but still in her red jacket. Her mother stopped when she saw him. Walter knelt. I just wanted to say thank you, he said softly. What you did mattered. The girl blinked. You're the same man? He nodded. She smiled, then hugged him. Walter stood again. In a world full of blurred lines and broken respect, that small moment became his anchor, because sometimes to see the truth, you have to disappear first. Back in the small rented office, the laptop hummed quietly. Walter sat motionless, eyes locked on the screen. His hands hovered above the keyboard. Everything was ready. He had edited nothing. There were no special effects, no music, no voiceover. Just raw footage, time-stamped and unfiltered. He wanted people to see it exactly as it happened. Each look of disgust, each act of kindness, each moment where someone had a choice. He uploaded the video to a new account with no name, no photo, no history. Just a title. This man pretended to be homeless, to see who still respected him. And then he waited. The first hour passed in silence. 5 views, then 50, then 100. He stepped outside for air. When he came back, the video had passed 1,000. By evening, it had reached 10,000. Comments flooded in, some shocked, some apologetic, others angry. I walk that street every day. I can't believe I didn't see him. This broke my heart. That little girl is a better person than most adults. He fought for us and we gave him nothing. Walter didn't respond. He just read. Then came a call. Not from a stranger, not from a reporter, but from an old friend, Captain Ron Ellis. They hadn't spoken in almost 10 years. Walter, the voice came through rough but steady. Is that really you? It's me, Walter replied. I saw the video. I don't even know what to say. Walter smiled faintly. Then don't say anything. There was a long pause on the line. You always were the quiet one, Ron said. But this wasn't quiet. The whole unit's talking about it. Some of the guys cried. Walter didn't answer. Ron continued, his voice softer now. People are asking questions. City council's getting involved. Some local stations are playing clips. You just made the whole country look in the mirror, Walt. Walter looked at the screen again. The view count had passed 50,000. He closed the laptop. He didn't want fame. He didn't want applause. He wanted truth. And now they had it. That night, Walter walked back to the corner where it all began. He didn't sit. He didn't carry a sign. He just stood in silence as people passed. Some walked by without noticing. But a few stopped, looked at him, and nodded. Not because of the video. Not because of pity. But because now they finally saw him. 3 days later, the video had passed 1 million views. Major news outlets picked it up. Headlines spread across social media. Veteran goes undercover as homeless to test society. The man with the sign, a social experiment that broke the internet. Real hero, real hurt. The story was everywhere. Walter's inbox overflowed. Offers came in from talk shows, veterans organizations, charities, even publishers. Politicians sent letters. Advocacy groups asked for interviews. But Walter answered none of them. Instead, he returned to his quiet apartment on the city's edge. No medals on the wall. No photos on the shelves. Just a small wooden box on the table, filled with folded papers. Letters from soldiers he had once led. Some alive, some not. He sat by the window as the sun set, orange light spilling across the floor. In the distance, sirens wailed, children laughed, and the city moved on. But something had changed. In the days following the video's release, more people stopped when they saw someone on the sidewalk. Some offered food, some offered words, some just listened. Small things, but real, and not just in Portland. Across the country, other veterans began to share their own stories. Some heartbreaking, some healing, but all of them now had a place to be heard. Walter never revealed his full name in the video. He never showed his face clearly. He didn't need to. This wasn't about him. It was about what we choose to see. When no one tells us what we're looking at. And now, when Walter walked the streets, not in disguise, not in shame, people nodded. Not because they knew his story, but because they finally understood what respect really meant. Not medals, not uniforms, not titles, but dignity, presence, and quiet strength. On a quiet morning 1 week later, Walter returned to the same sidewalk where it all began. He brought nothing but a thermos of coffee and a folding chair. He sat down, not to test the world this time, but simply to watch it. A young man passed by and stopped. "You're the guy from the video, right?" Walter said nothing, just smiled faintly. The young man nodded slowly, then extended his hand. "Thank you." Walter shook it, then looked out at the street, where people were moving a little slower now, a little more aware, a little more human. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something settle deep inside him. Not fame, not vindication, but peace. And that was enough.